You joined Dodo at the point where they were already scaling outside of Russia.
We rang out CFO and said, look, we need $1 million. I said, no, we don't have that money. Okay, I will sell my shares and I will invest my own money into producing this film.
What can a corporate person tell you?
You don't need a brand marketer, you need a product marketer or a growth marketer.
Brand and marketing is sort of more secondary.
What the hell does that mean?
What role community plays in the branding and sort of growth?
This is like the top-notch, hardcore brand marketing that every marketer could dream of.
The cheapest way to do marketing
And the hardest.
Yes.
And the hardest.
How authentic should startups be?
If we can become a role model for other businesses, then maybe our world will not be as doomed because I'm too old and too spoiled and too lazy.
Every founder everywhere.
May I give a prediction where you'll be next?
Welcome to the Growth Hour, the No BS podcast where startups learn how to grow and scale. I'm Blanca.
I'm Zoya.
And today we have Mikhail, our honorary guest, Global Brand Director of InDrive. Welcome.
Hi Blanca, hi Zoe. I initially launched it was a Swedish startup at that time, so it's not the Tele2 that you know. So it's a small company, it was only 13 regions, and then we were launching a lot of different regions, and then I moved myself at 2010, so 15 years ago, I moved myself to Croatia. So I was relaunching actually brand for Tele2 in Croatia. And this is how I ended up being in Croatia 15 years ago. So that's me there. Then I was invited back to Russia, and I still was living in Croatia, to actually launch the first mobile virtual network on Yota brand, because Megafon bought Yota, and they didn't know what to do. They just wanted to absorb the frequencies. But we said, look, you have a fantastic brand. The brand is super sexy. Shall we do MVNO, virtual operator? At that time, nobody understood what it is. And then we said, well, it's going to be the first, and we did it here, the first real unlimited mobile internet for smartphones. And this is how we disrupted the Russian market, and almost with zero budget, we got 3 million subscribers from the competitors. Then I was invited to VK, which is Russian Facebook, after it was bought by Mail.ru. And they said, well, you're going to be a marketing director. I said, why? What does marketing for VK? Because it's like, selling drugs, sex, and rock and rolls for teenager. I mean, you don't do anything, and still it will grow as long as you have, unlicensed content, a lot of music, sometimes even porn. I'm not proud of it at all. But then we figured out what to do. And I have some fun stories, but that was a corporate world. And actually, in parallel, when I was here, actually in Croatia, sitting in Croatia in 2010, I met an amazing guy. I met him accidentally in Moldova, in Chisinau. And his name was Fyodor. And he had a dream to launch the largest pizza chain based on IT in the world. And he had just one pizzeria in far north city, Syktyvkar. And I fell in love with the guy because two weeks before I read a book about him, the book called «И ботаники делают бизнес». I don't know how it's translated in English, sorry. And I was like, oh my God, I want to meet the guy. Be afraid of what you wish. Because I met the guy, I fell in love with the guy. Then 2 weeks later, I'm flying from Zagreb to Syktyvkar, and I'm starting to be an advisor for Fyodor, for Dodo Pizza, when he had only one pizzeria. And he said, look, I don't have money to pay to you because I don't actually have any money. Can I pay you with stocks? I was like, what stocks? What does it mean? Well, it's, it's a virtual thing. It's like a share of the company. I said, what is it worth? Well, actually, nothing. Okay, well, sounds like a plan. But maybe in some future, if we do it, that might be worth good money. So to cut a long story short, he grabs me here. He goes with me in a restaurant and say, look, Misha, we're soon going to enter Moscow. We're soon going to have 50 pizzerias. And we need a CMO, full-time. I said, no worries, Fyodor. We're going to find you a very good CMO. And I said, no, you're going to be our CMO. It's like, well, but, I'm living my best life, having, Natalia Vadyanova at the evening, going to Kremlin in the midday to approve stickers with Putin. I'm not proud of it. I did it. I still pay my karma. And they said, but it's probably boring. And we have only money for 6 months. And we will not turn around, then we bankrupt. So, well, that's a good sales pitch. And I jumped from this corporate, business class, very comfortable chair of everything included. All drinks are for free, amazing salary. I cut my salary here 2 times because we don't have money to pay me salary. And I jumped into, and I actually go to Syktyvkar because this is where we had the office. We didn't have an office in Moscow yet. Then I wake up, I remember it was February. I wake up on this bunk bed because we were living in hostel. And I'm thinking, what the fuck did I do? I mean, there is no system, there is no marketing, there is no nothing, there's no team. And that was the most fun 5.5 years here. But then we have a dramatic story in the UK, which I was launching myself with a lot of a fantastic team. And we had to shut down UK business because of the war.
You've mentioned you kind of went from a corporate world to a startup world, and you made that transition for being an advisor, actually, which is unusual. So
I have to say it's also unusual for startups to have an advisor from a corporate world. We are always like, what can a corporate person tell you? So why were you so important to them? Because I think that's a big debate. How can somebody who has like this big budget behind them, an existing brand, usually a legacy product in some way, legacy industry, how can you help a startup?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I was lucky when I met Fyodor because I was at Tele2 Russia, and it was actually a small startup with very low budget. I'm sure if he met me when I was in VK, he wouldn't even look at my site. He would say, okay, what can this guy bring to me? Nothing. Maybe some bureaucracy, which we don't tolerate. But the beauty of Tele2 was the values that were actually given by the founder, Jan Stenbeck. He's an amazing guy, amazing story. And Tele2 is a discounter. And the beauty and the beast of being discounter is that you have much fewer marketing budgets than your competitors. So you have to be super innovative and super lean in how you execute your marketing. You have to carefully count every penny, and you have to be very unconventional. And this is, I think, what touched Fyodor hard, because he thought, okay, value-wise, we're very much alike with Tele2, because we're also challenger in our way. Money-wise, we also don't have any money. Well, the only thing which we're not kind of fit, we don't want to be a discounter. And that was also my problem, because, I learned a lot from Tele2, a lot of aggressive marketing things, which helped me a lot when we were relaunching Dodo in the UK, because we also didn't have the budget. But I think what really kind of struck us is this value thing that clicked. And I think we even had this saying in Dodo that same acquires the same, or no, not acquires, like same... Attract the same, thanks, exactly. And this is how we were recruiting the people. We actually didn't care much about the hard skills or experience as long as we saw the same passion in the eyes and the hunger of person doing something great. Because usually it takes like 3 to 6 months for a person to learn anything in terms of hard skills. But values, you don't teach the values. They're either with you or without.
That's actually was going to be my next question around hiring, because you didn't talk that much about it. And it's often a struggle for startups to find people who have both, like have the hard skills and the passion, have that experience. And I actually often get that question when I talk to startups on kind of who would you hire as your first marketer, or when you don't have that many resources, you can't hire a whole team, who would you hire? So what were like the people that at Dodo when you joined, what kind of people were you hiring? I mean, you explained a little bit from a personality perspective, but in terms of how did you identify, okay, these are the type of people, the type of skills that we need for this problem? Did you have that?
We didn't, but I would actually rephrase your question into the way, who were the people that actually succeeded in Dodo? What qualities did they have, and why did they succeed? And actually, it's completely different profiles. Depends on the maturity phase of the Dodo. Initially, it was just, kids with shining eyes. They didn't do anything, but they were willing to work super hard. And the people that worked, 16 hours, 18 hours, and they were learning super fast. But then we actually understood that the next people we want. Still, we want the shining eyes, brightening eyes, but we call them generalists, basically people that can do everything. They could be a marketer, they can be a little bit of CFO, they can be a little bit of operational manager, etc. Because you don't have resources to actually specify people, and actually you don't know what to do.
Yeah, you don't even know.
Yeah, like today you need to do the balance sheet, tomorrow you need to do design on Canva, and day after tomorrow you need to do the press conference.
And even about the channels, sometimes you are not even sure what the right channel is for you.
Exactly, and usually these people are generalists, and also they have the fearless culture, but also they need to have, as Fyodor said it, he put it very interesting, he said, people with scientific approach. Like, what the hell does that mean? Well, and it means very simple. Those who don't afraid to make an experiment, but they take learnings from the experiment. Because at startup, and you know it much better than I do, what you do, you always do hypothesis, experiment, results, hypothesis, experiment, results. So this was like the second tier of successful guys. But when we grew to a big company, then it's completely different profile. It's a hardcore specialization.
Specialist,
It's, this T-shaped managers. Because before it was like, I don't know, if that letter exists, it's like ding, 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 a lot of legs. It's probably, I don't know how сороконожка will be in English, but it will be сороконожка. What is сороконожка?
I don't know.
Come on.
A comb, whatever.
Yeah.
But I have just, I feel the need to add something on this topic when you're saying, like, in the very early stage, young people, but I would say that young people, if you have at least one marketer who knows what they are doing. And I think that
we had that person, his name was Fyodor. He was the CEO and the marketing. Actually, I was joking, and it was not a joke, it was true. The real CMO in the company is Fyodor. I'm just operationalizing his vision. He was the strategist guy, and then the kids were running around and trying to actually not operationalize, but execute his parts of the vision. But then at a certain point, he realized that his vision and the execution has too far apart. There is no strategy in between. And he realized, okay, damn, we actually need a strategy. And then we need to hire someone that knows how to do it properly. And that's where we had the second marketing director after Fyodor, which is me. Yeah.
But if what we see mostly in startups, not just in this region, but generally, is that founders sometimes don't have this marketing expertise. So what would you say, would you be a great hire for a startup founder or a startup that are like engineers, got some funding, need a marketing person? Would you hire yourself at that time? And
never.
Who would you hire? Yeah, okay.
No, I would not hire myself right now. No, because I'm too old and too spoiled and too lazy. I would hire myself. Back then, yes. I was still hungry, and my neuroplasticity was still kind of younger. So I would do good.
I like that you're honest.
Yeah, now, no, never, no.
No, but I think the question is, because oftentimes people think that they should hire somebody from a corporate world. Sometimes people are saying, no, don't hire somebody from a corporate world. What would be your honest view on this?
It very much depends. If you really need this deep expertise in your startup and you're ready, like, for example, if your startup now on the scale phase and you actually now have a lot of funding from different funds and investors, you need a CFO, because otherwise there'll be no good balance sheet, etc. Same, for example, with marketing. You have an injection of good financing and you're scaling and your product market fit is healthy, then you need a good marketing person, but ideally maybe not from the corporate world, but somehow in between. Basically, he might have an experience in corporate world, but he knows how to, do the lean, the growth marketing, etc. So something in between, because the corporate marketing is still very different. I mean, don't hire people from, for example, Sberbank. No, they will kill your startup. Now, this is the fundamental thought here. If you guys at startups and you have a product that actually has innovation, don't waste your time on brand. Waste your time, actually not waste, invest your time and money, if you have some money, into actually finding the best product market fit. And test it in performance marketing, that's fine. The only metric that you should look at is actually retention rate, because that shows how good your product is. But then you have some time. Usually it's limited time. Because if a small startup, there's Yandex, Google there, they're looking at you and they either will buy you if you're lucky, and if you're unlucky, they will copy your product. And that's why at that point, at a certain point, and nobody knows when this point happens, you need to start investing into brand, because this is when the commoditization happens. Now, that depends very much on category to category. But this has happened to ride-hail. I mean, ride-hail, if you look 10 years ago, it was completely here. I mean, Uber, Didi, Yandex Taxi, InDrive, they were basically all innovators. And what they were doing, they were just grabbing the territories. And it was, I mean, it was blue oceans out there. There was no, I mean, there was no competition. Now, we're actually already somewhere here. We're here. But soon, and this is what our founder, Arsen, feels, that's what he thinks, we're actually going to be completely the same. All Uber, Didi, Grab, Bolt, Yandex, InDrive. So that's why he knows that the purpose-driven brand will make the significant difference. But he doesn't do it, just for the marketing gimmick. He does it from his heart.
So you're saying product market fit, but when we talk about, and even on our podcast, we had several episodes about product market fit, and we always have discussions, what is product market fit? So how do you define product market fit? At which point you're like, okay, this is exactly where I need to switch to invest in the brand and all of that?
For me, there's several indicators that shows that you have a healthy product market fit. First, your funnel is healthy. That means that at the end of the day, you have a very good conversion and retention. For me, actually, retention is the number one metrics that shows that you have a very good very good product. The second is unit economics. So at the end, if you invest $1, then at the end of the day, you should get more than $1 as a return. And third, that if you can be scaled. So there is still potential for you. If you put $1 million, you will still have enough room to kind of grow your business. So these three parameters, for me, this is a healthy product market fit.
I would agree with this decision.
We
usually don't. There's always something that we would add, but I think it's a moving target. But what would you, if we talk about the product market fit stage, so did I understand correctly that you both think that pre-product market fit, you should not be thinking about the brand?
The simple answer, yes, the simple answer. Because when you're pre-product market fit, you don't actually think about the product. For me, actually the whole brand thing at least have 3 stages. One is when you don't have a brand, but you have a product, and actually you communicate product not from the feature perspective, but from the benefit perspective. For example, that sounds very theoretical. You can, I don't know, sell a charger saying it has 45 milliwatts. And what the hell is this? Or you can say it charges your phone within 1 hour. That's how you communicate feature from the benefit. And that's the product side. And you don't need a brand there. And you can actually test the product already with performance marketing, with research, asking the audience, okay, I have this, would you buy it or not? And then you actually test it on the real market, you do the landing, you do the performance, and see where the demand. Now, when you have this, then you move to another stage. You add emotion to it. So basically, what does it give you? I don't know, the happiness. Usually it's a positive emotion. If you're not in the kind of a social issue business or some non-profit business, there can be negative emotions there. And then the third, and very few go there, like probably less than 1%, is this purpose. It's like why actually do the business? Not for money, but is there something bigger than money that you do this? So 3 stages. And the first stage, pre-product, it's just defining the product. Forget about the brand. Do the hygiene. I mean, do the just nice color. Find some good designer freelancer that, just shape it up. You don't even need the brand strategy there. Just do the product strategy yet.
That's a good question here. So why do you need a marketer then at that stage?
You need a marketer with a different profile. You don't need a brand marketer, but you need a growth marketer. Basically, you need and actually, you can call it growth marketer or product marketer. So basically, those that can translate from technical language, because usually the guys, they talk feature language, into the benefit language, but from a consumer perspective. Not your thinking of benefit, how would consumer? And usually this growth marketer, they show the product to people and they listen. Okay, what do they get? And then how the consumer perceive the benefit. So they use this language to actually package the product, but it's still not a branding. You don't need a branding marketer. You need a product marketer or a growth marketer.
What is the main activities that a startup should be doing in the product market fit, and when in a post-product market fit you should start thinking about something else?
So for me, the first step is defining the product. The pre-product market fit, you need to, with the cycles, define what is the product and whether the product does have a product market fit. So at that stage, you just need, a simple product marketer. And usually, it's either the person from the product side that can, speak the consumer language. It doesn't even have to be the marketeer. And then when you found this product market fit and you have a good traction, so you have a good retention, then it's scale up thing. Then it's completely different marketing profile. Then it's the person that understands the channels and then understand both worlds. The worlds of performance marketing, because this is where you start invest more, because this is what gets you the first traction, the growth. And ideally the second leg, the brand leg. So that's the second kind of part. And then the probably third stage, when you're already in the mature market, when you, hopefully within 5 to 10 years, you become number one in your category, then you have like a super duper CMO that knows everything, that knows the product, that knows the communication side, that knows the customer service, which I actually don't know at all, et cetera, et cetera. So he knows all the consumer touch points and how they work. So it's a high kind of CMO profile, which I've never been myself there.
I want to a little bit switch gears here because I want to talk about these kind of relationships between you as a CMO and the founder, and then maybe a CFO. This is a very typical question for a lot of people. So actually, I know Fyodor quite well, and he's one of the most inspiring founders. And I'm guessing there wasn't a big problem when it comes to a buy-in on kind of what things are need to happen. But did you have experience and like? Can you describe that relationship a little bit? But also, did you have experience where it was challenging to get a buy-in on what needs to be done from a brand perspective or a product marketing perspective with the founder or a CFO? Do you have any advice on that? Because that's I think for most marketers, one of the most challenging things when they're in the situation where people think, well, brand and marketing is sort of more secondary.
Yeah, like fluffy things.
Yes.
Now, I was lucky because Fyodor, from the beginning, he had this gut feeling that he needs to have, and he was actually very, very operational. He believed in the power of not brand, actually, but in the power of two things, of good design. He believed in it. And we started to invest from day one, even when we had like one pizzeria, in our own photo lab, because we understood that you start to eat product pizza with your eyes by looking at the picture. So we have, and actually the photographer that we hired there, she still works in Dodo Pizza.
Oh, wow.
She's like one of the first employees and she's still there. So he believed in the power of design. That's why we invested a lot from the day one in the design language, in the photo language. And then he felt it, that he also understood that there is a power of, how do you put it? Of meanings. Basically, he understood that, and we did a lot of mistakes there because we were initial positioning of us that we were presented it with a lot of crowd and our partners saying, look, we are going to not just sell pizza, but we're going to sell happiness. And then next week, Domino's in Russia saying delivering happiness within 30 minutes. Like, oh shit, they stole it. But then we realized if they stole it, that's not ours. This is not ownable. That means it's bullshit. That we created something fake, something artificial, something that any pizzeria can claim. And then we were looking a lot, and this is how we actually understood that we are, at the end of the day, we sell trust, not even the happiness, etc. And building trust is probably the hardest thing in the world of branding and product. But then we kind of understood, and we created like a letter. We used our own brand framework, which we never had in the books. We created like I even remember this letter. It was called in Russian Kdot Plus, so it was taste, quality, affordability, openness, trust, and then plus, the plus was community. So at the end of the day, we want to have a community of fans, which are like 3 to 5%. They would do all the marketing for you. This is how we came up with the idea of having the Dodo book, then the Dodo book number 2. Wow. And this is, for example, how we ended up with the idea with InDrive having a documentary, because we also feel the power of community, which I actually think what you're doing in-house is amazing. This is like the top-notch, hardcore brand marketing that every marketer could dream of. And very hard one, actually, like probably the hardest one.
Yeah, actually, I think that's only recently became something people talk about, is what what role community plays in the branding and sort of growth, because when you have community, then you have everything. You have sort of brand that's recognized. You also have the word of mouth. You really need to spend less money. Like, actually, that's something that at House in the beginning, everyone asked us how much money did we invest in advertising and all of this, and we did everything actually for free. We got partnerships for free, and then everyone spread the word, and to this day, most of the community is growing just by people recommending. So that's definitely the cheapest way to do marketing.
And the hardest. And the hardest one.
Yeah.
So big respect for that.
Actually, since today we're doing this in front of a live audience, we have a bunch of questions that we need to get through.
Yeah.
But there's actually quite a bit of questions around, you joined Dodo at the point where they were already scaling outside of Russia. But can you tell us a little bit about sort of the backstory of, like, how big were they at that point, and how did you get the money for that expansion? And you were saying how you were scaling sort of something that wasn't an optimal product at that point. Where did you get the funding, and where did you get the money, and how did you convince, further that we need to spend more money on scaling things that are not yet working?
There were several phases of funding. The initial one was when I was advisor, and Fyodor tried to talk with a big investor and big funds. Nobody believed in him. They basically said, boy, you have nothing, and forget it. What he did, and he had the power of community, he had a blog, and he made a crowdfunding. That was probably the first crowdfunding campaign ever in Russia, 11 years ago, when he said, look, I need money. And then it was around 100 people, including our future CFO. Our future CFO was at that time in London. He was working at Goldman Sachs, and he invested his own money through crowdfunding. So that was the first phase. And actually, his story is also fun. Then he started to understand how business works. He thought, oh shit, that's actually really bad. So then he appointed himself as a CFO to make sure that his money is not burnt.
That's how you get a CFO.
Exactly,
that's good.
from Goldman Sachs. Yeah,
Yes.
from London, going to Syktyvkar. Can you imagine that? You just make him your investor.
That's awesome.
Then the next one, actually, we had pre-agreed term deals from one of the very big funds in Russia, this international fund. And the deal was actually pre-signed, and we were expecting the big injection because we were entering Moscow. Moscow is a super expensive market because of high competition, etc. Mm-hmm. And then, like, before the night of signing, a fund canceled it and said, look, we don't want to do that. And then later we understood that they had negotiations also with competitor, and they decided to go with competitor. Wow. That was a hit because we only had money on our account without scale up only for 6 months. So then what Fyodor and this CFO did, they made a quick round through private investors. And then we found one fantastic guy, IT guy actually from also Siberia, who privately invested more or less the same check which the fund was going to invest, and that saved us. And they gave us the capital to enter Moscow. And then we had a plan. It was an expensive, very expensive, move. But then we realized if we can hit Moscow, and we would hit most of the cities of 1 million, that would give us, from the marketing perspective, scale to be present on federal advertising. And federal advertising, because I was working in media before, in Zenit Optimedia, it's much more from the return on investment, more efficient versus the investing into regional advertising. But we actually had to sell this idea initially to Fyodor. It took him some time to understand it. But then, most important, to partners, because Dodo is a franchising company. So we had to persuade partners, and that was a mission at its own, to actually give us 3% of the revenue additionally on top of the royalty to actually fund the national marketing. And they were disagreeing. They said, no, we're not going to sign it. So what we've done, we actually used this investor money, and with our own money, we funded our first national advertising campaign. And I remember even the budget, it was 30 million rubles. At that time, it was a good budget. But then we made, of course, a little bit tricky. So we launched at that time our application, and we made a very aggressive promo. Download the app and get the first pizza for free. So actually this one was paid by franchisees because they needed to do that. And of course the install rate was amazing, the conversion rate was amazing, the new clients intake amazing, the growth, the revenue amazing. So in terms of return on investment, it was more than 250%. We presented to the partners. Did they say yes? No, they didn't. So what we had to do, we said it has to be fair deal. So we basically took the most influential partners that have the biggest share of revenue in the whole thing, and we took them on a trip to mountain, Plata Putarana. And there was no cell phones, nothing. We were walking with them for a week, persuading them, 10 people. And then we persuaded them, then they returned back, they said yes, and we got 92% votes saying yes. I think a presidential election would be easier than to sign that deal.
This sounds like not marketing, but like politics.
It
in
is,
a way.
it was.
Yes.
It was at that time.
But I think it's a great segue with this answer to another question we got, and I think it's a very common one. How to convince a CFO to give you budget to do stuff that will later convert. So usually you can't, when you are doing performance marketing and things like that, you can just say if we invest more, if you have a formula already. But how do you tackle, and especially I think in this question, I think somebody is talking from their personal experience probably, when there's a strong personality CFO with their perspectives, and then how to address these issues in a startup?
That's a good one and tough one. Now, there is two approaches. One is easy one, the second is tough one. Easy one, if you have CEO with you, then two of you just go to CFO and CEO makes CFO to sign it. Now, that's the easy way. The hard way is, of course, proving by experiments. And because CFO only believes in number. Now, we had the same thing, and I'm also advising some different startups. So, for example, when we have a startup that present, like technological startup in different cities, what we do a small scale. It can be A/B test or ABC test in 2-3 cities. So we test different hypotheses. For example, in one city, we do a lot of advertising upper funnel. In the second one, we do just performance. And in third, we do both. But it's like cities of 100, 150,000 people. And usually it's a cheap experiment. And then out of this experiments, within 3 to 6 months, you get an understanding how it grew it at all, etc. So you get the numbers. Then you come with these numbers to a CFO and say, look, that's the test. This is a successful or not successful. Then we scale. And then they usually convince. So that's
Show them the data.
Yeah, they only believe in numbers. I mean, CFO only believe in Excel. So if you don't have Excel, you go home and do your homework.
So what is the difference between B2B and B2C? Another question here.
I'm very bad at B2B. I never worked at B2B. But what I know, again, from the marketing perspective, that at the end of the day, decision makers at B2B are also people. Still, it's different rules of the games, but still the positioning works, etc. I mean, I remember the fantastic IBM campaign, which I love. It was very simple. IBM made an ad said, nobody was ever fired for choosing IBM. And that was actually targeted to CTOs because they were the decision makers. And the only fear they had, and they got it also from focus groups, that they would be fired by making a wrong choice of equipment. And it's a hardcore.
I actually didn't know it was a campaign, but I know it as a phrase.
Yeah.
We repeat it all the time.
It was an advertising campaign, but this is technical thing.
But I totally agree on the fact that there are people behind this thing, and most of my experience is all in B2B, and I do think that maybe like 15 years ago, people were thinking, oh, it's a B2B marketer versus a B2C marketer, but now I feel like in terms of the brand, in terms of like community aspect, a lot of different parts of the marketing, I feel like it's the same because you're trying to create an experience, you're trying to evoke emotions. There's difference on the follow-through afterwards because there's a lot more process. You have to check off certain boxes a lot more than in B2C, because in B2C there's such thing as emotional buy. Very rarely, unless you're selling to a founder who for some reason decided to buy something on a whim. But actually in B2B, it's like after the fact, product marketing has to do a much better job in terms of communicating benefits. But I would say that there is a big problem right now that some B2B companies are still thinking in that sort of old mentality, whereas the one that we know about, like Miro or Canva, they're actually making most of their money in B2B.
True.
Not in B2C. But the fact that we know their brand, that we have a certain emotion and affinity for that, creates that growth for them that they wouldn't have if they were focusing on like, oh, let's just do LinkedIn campaigns and email outreach to people.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the laws of the physics of marketing are the same for B2B and B2C. I think the activation is different, especially on the hardcore B2B, like if you're selling, I don't know, spaceships or a very expensive part of equipment, then probably the sales length is not, one day, but can be several years. And then the important factor of, people communicate. It's not advertising communicating, but people communicating, but they still communicating on the
Still people.
exactly on the language that the other part and your consumer understand. And then, as you said, I think it's important after you sell, what do you do with this? Because then it's a kind of more relationship marketing, which we on the B2C kind of automate that level. There's like automatic relationship versus here it's more human relationship. The story of InDrive is so inspirational that we dared to create a documentary. And this is what we've done last year with actually 6 different directors. It's 6 different stories from 6 countries. And this documentary, it's actually online. It's movie.indrive.com. We just won 4 Cannes Dolphins, and we just been shortlisted in New York Film Festival just last week. It's an amazing story here. I'm not here to advertise it, but I'm actually to advertise this. What we've done, we've recruited 100 drivers and 100 passengers with regular behavior. And then we did a simple A/B test. We showed them the movie. We didn't pay them anything. We didn't even give them the drinks or popcorn, like guys doing here today. So they just watched the movie. And then we observed them versus the control group. Control group, they're the same drivers and same passengers that had the same behavior. And over 3 months, we've seen that the retention rate increased almost by 12%, which is like triple. And this is what we observe even at shorter form, because the problem with this one, it's a long form. It's 45 minutes. Now, it's really hard to persuade people to watch a movie about your brand or company for 45 minutes unless they're really attached to it. So what we're trying to do is we try to do the same experience on a larger scale, but within the 45 seconds or 60 seconds. The figures are not as big though, but still we see the correlation between the retention, NPS, and as a result, LTV, when you actually communicate the purpose of your brand.
And just to follow up on the CFO discussion. So in InDrive, you did a documentary.
Oh, yeah.
How did you pitch that to the CFO?
That was very simple. It was the first option. So basically, CEO said, there was actually a very interesting discussion. So CEO said, look, I very much believe in the... It was actually an interesting story. So initially he said, look, we're going to have a 10-year anniversary of our company. Let's do a corporate movie. I said, that's boring. I mean, let's not make a corporate movie. Let's make a real documentary. I said, okay, let's do a real documentary. And we started to pitch it. We started to find different, companies. And then we realized, damn, for this project, if we really, and we put ambitious, basically, we said, it should be the level of Netflix. And actually, we want to be there, and we want to have the documentary award for that. So then the minimal check that we got it from different directors is like $1 million. So we came to CEO and said, let's meet $1 million. Oh, no problem, $1 million. So we rang out CFO and said, look, we need $1 million. So no, we don't have that money.
That's like a meme, we don't have that money as
exactly.
CFOs.
Yeah,
I'll write it somewhere here.
That's what Zoe typically tells me all the time.
Yeah, but then it was a very cool story. Then CEO come back to us and said, look, what's the minimal to have that quality, minimal. So we did again the new pitch, we found a different setup, different production, etc. So we spent another 2 months and said the minimal for that quality, 500,000. Then we came to CFO and said, no, we don't have that money. So then what CEO said, okay, I will sell my shares and I will invest my own money into producing this film.
Wow.
And I thought, shit. Because that's so much pressure on me and my team. Because if we screwed up, that's the personal money of CEO. So we were like, okay, that's the project we cannot screw up.
Wow.
So yeah, that was the personal money of our CEO. That was not the business money. That was not corporate money.
Actually, that's one thing because I know...
So the tip is get a rich CEO.
Yeah, well, or have a company because he was not rich actually before.
Yeah.
Because I met Arsene as well. Second most, but second also really inspiring founder. And I was in an event where he was presenting the whole story about sort of, responsibility to the society in terms of education. He was telling how he's sponsoring I think 11 kids to go through Ivy League education in the US.
With his personal money.
Yes.
And that's a very, I think the check there is more than 100,000 per kid. Yeah.
I think he said it's several $1 million. I think that he's spending every year.
Money.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about Arsene, the most expensive thing he owns is a laptop. He doesn't own anything. The only money that basically he sells some shares. he all reinvest into this challenging injustice thing, and has a lot of has the projects which we're now trying to combine into build as a part of ecosystem. We call it a movement. So we don't want to have a project anymore, but more like we're asking ourselves, how can we, together with GR, together with Ministry of Women, there is Ministry of Women in Peru, did you know that?
Wow.
Together with them, with our product, with maybe having some education there, with NGOs, can actually help not 11, not 1,000, but millions of women in Latin America to be more economically empowered, basically to earn more or to spend less or both. And maybe not indirectly, maybe through education, maybe through actually providing education to their kids, etc. And that's a very interesting mindset that actually shapes completely the different, the business model, because he says that usually the business solves two problems, the customer problem and the shareholders problem. So you create like a product that sells and you generate the revenue and profit for shareholders. Now, he said we have the third element, which is the most important, which is actually the positive impact that we bring to community. And the first two, they have to contribute to the third. And this is his vision. And he said, if we can become a role model for other businesses, then maybe our world will not be as doomed as it is right now, actually.
And that's another question I had, actually, that I really wanted to ask you, because both Fyodor and Arsen are really visionaries. They have a strong personal brand as a founder. I guess my experience is that when you have that, it's much easier to do marketing in any way, and like in terms of branding specifically, when you have a CEO that you can market, let's say, in that way. Is that your experience as well? Is it helpful? Did you somehow help them in that journey, or any like how did that work in partnership with you?
That's a great question. And actually, that's a bridge to B2B question, because their personal brand is super strong, and further, it's mostly his own kind of desire and will to build it. But then, of course, he had a team to support. So we had like a writer that was helping him, Maxim Kodin, who actually wrote the book, and he was on the backside of all the English language posts further in LinkedIn, etc. So he kind of put this profile. But very few people believe, but all the posts that he wrote and writes on Instagram and Facebook completely by him. Nobody, and that was actually it was a nightmare for the company, because sometimes he was writing things which he should not write. And we never had the PR. He said, well, we will never have a PR. I hate PR. PR go away. I am a PR myself. So that was sometimes a very tough thing to manage. But
every founder everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it really helped a lot on the B2B perspective, especially on finding the first franchisee partners and then finding the partners on the broader scale. Same, for example, with Arsen. Yeah, same thing, same story. I mean, as the book that he wrote himself, and then he creates and he writes a lot of posts himself. And that helps a lot in terms of business relations and GR relations, because this is where usually the CEO brand exposed, because usually the end consumer for B2C, they don't really know the founder and don't really care. But of course, this community, this 3-5% of your fans, they would know that and they would benefit. Your brand will also benefit. But then, as you said, you have to make sure that the personal brand of the founder is aligned in terms of the values with the consumer brand. There is no clashes. And I was lucky because there was no clashes between Fyodor and Dodo. Actually, Dodo brand had a lot of values which Fyodor brought. I mean, like radical transparency, that's his own personal value. And I even asked myself, Fyodor, you are from Russia. You're actually from Syktyvkar. Where did that radical transparency comes from? Because, in Russia we have this saying that, тише едешь, дальше будешь, деньги любят тишины, money loves the silence. It's like the Russian saying, money loves silence. So if you're like businessman, I mean, look at the successful businessmen.
Don't talk about anything.
Like only Tinkov probably is, the public thing, and Fyodor. But the Russians are never bragging about them because, someone will knock and say, I'm going to help you with your money. And you don't want that.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. And he said, well, I was from Syktyvkar, and for me, the only way to survive, between these gangs is actually to be super open, because then they don't touch me. Because then they understand that I'm actually naive, this guy with glasses, actually smart, so they don't touch me. So for him, that was the way to survive. And then he understood that by radical openness, he could make and transfer the world to a little bit better place. And he still believes in that.
Here it opens up something relevant. So you mentioned how the founders identity and values were a big part in the brand value. And I think it's also, especially in the early stages, this question of brand authenticity. You can see, even if you're like just starting out post product market fit, you're not that into the strategic view of your brand, but sometimes you can, okay, I'll let you talk, but how authentic should startups be in this, at least first few stages? I think all the time you have to be authentic with your brand, but sometimes you can maybe see the vision is, oh, I need to get there, I'll get there later, but now at least I'll pretend I'm there. Mm-hmm. How dangerous it is? Did you see some really bad stories in that sense? Because I feel...
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there's several questions in this. First one, how dangerous the fake it before you make it? Yeah. Hello, Elizabeth Holmes. And then the second part of this question is how to ensure that the CEO or owner personality can actually help you on the early stage. I don't know the answer on the first one, but I will try to answer on the second one. And this is my personal approach, because I sometimes do in advising and consulting to startups. And the first thing I do, I actually interview the CEO and try to understand why he does what he does and where his real passion is. And if I see that there is a certain thing besides the money, because usually there is childhood trauma there, and if I like this childhood trauma, I say, well, I'll go there and I'll actually show you how to go. If I don't like the childhood trauma, and usually these are like the fake things, like, I want to pretend, I want to show off, I want, buy expensive clothes, that doesn't hit my childhood trauma. So I said, look, you need someone else, I'll actually give you advice. So then I don't do that, because I think the only way on the early stage is that when CEO or the owner of the company actually put his own values into the product, and he tries to solve something besides,
that hurts him.
Exactly, something that really ignites him, and that will ignite the team, and that will ignite the consumers. That gives the power. And I actually had a call today with the CEO of InDrive, with Arsene, and I presented him a new strategy, which actually comes from him. He said, look, I was born in Yakutsk. And that was injustice. I mean, that's the coldest city in the world. My childhood was a mess. And there was so many injustices in the world that I've suffered from, that I've seen, that I want to make life of people where we do business a little bit better, economically. Then we formulated that we actually creating InDrive business to challenge the injustice by providing people with more opportunities and actually economically empower them. The drivers to earn more fare, passengers to pay less, because it's a peer-to-peer model. And then we reinvest part of our revenue back to local communities, trying to empower women in Latin America and youth in countries like Pakistan, Egypt, and Kazakhstan through education. And this is what gives a lot of fuel for us and sense of what we do and why we do.
Follow-up question, because actually somebody asked, what is your childhood trauma? And I'm going to add to this. Actually, if you were to build your startup with a purpose right now, I mean, I know you said you're not maybe for a startup right now at this point, but let's imagine that you are 10 years ago. And I want to combine these two because I feel like it's connected. Kind of, what would you build? And how would you market it?
I actually had my own startup and it failed. I never do that.
Is that your childhood trauma now?
It's part of my, I would say, young adulthood trauma. I was so confident after I left Tele2 Croatia that I founded my own digital agency for Balkans in 2010. Never opened digital agency in Balkans. Never. That was the stupidest idea I could ever have. Because I then later realized that actually my clients who were, oh my God, I probably will piss off a lot of Croatian people right now, but they didn't care about, the smart marketing. It was more about, we know this guy who knows this guy, and that's why I'm going to place the advertisement there. So they just needed, and I thought, which is, I think, every startupper's kind of mistake, that if I do the product that I like, that people would like. No, don't do the product for yourself. Actually try to do something market wants. So that was my young adulthood trauma. So I tried to do startup and it completely failed. But it was a fantastic experience. I mean, we had a 1.5 year of fun pitching. And then we had a fantastic client from Israel that paid almost all our expenses because he was the guy, very smart guy, that needed this very sophisticated attribution model performance marketing thing that we were building. So that was there. But I think my childhood trauma is that I think I like to inspire people and to show that they have everything inside and try to show them through examples of they can achieve much more. So probably inspiration of others. And this, I think, what I happily doing through other businesses is trying to find this purpose, which actually combines the fire that the business have with the fires that customer have, and that they all together can create a flame, which then can make a little bit world better.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think one last question I have. What's next in terms of InDrive, in terms of what you're doing right now? Is there something that you can share with us that's like, what's coming up? What's next? What's the next thing you're going to do?
Actually, I love, at the stage where I am, I love InDrive, honestly, because I think it's an amazing company with amazing traction, an amazing founder and the team and the vision. So I think for me, the next 5 years for sure is InDrive, and I really want that company will become public, will go into IPO. And then after that, I will probably think.
Retire.
Yeah, I'm very afraid of that. I'm very afraid of actually early retirement, but probably have something big. But I haven't found it yet. And I think I'm super lucky and super privileged to be chosen first in Dodo and then in InDrive, and to do the work that actually wakes me up every day. And I'm super energized to do it. So InDrive is definitely next 5 years.
Cool. And but you're also investing in startups and all of that. So
I do.
You're keeping your,
I'm
hands
diversifying my portfolio. No, I'm investing some money and some time into people that I have this kind of passion thing. So if I share the passion, and I right now invested into a very interesting food tech startup in CIS, and we actually copied the model from the UK. It's a cloud kitchen startup, which I love. And there I'm both as an advisor and as an investor. And I love the guys because they're young, they're passionate, and I try to plug in with with different people, give them intellectual support, etc. This is one part. And the other part, which also fulfills me, is I'm also volunteering and I'm helping the fund, which is called Friends. It's a Friends fund in Russia. This is the fund that helps other funds. And it also this is my kind of volunteer work in terms of the time. But I feel the sense of purpose because that fund develops the whole ecosystem of NGOs in Russia, which they're now a little bit suffering, especially during the last 3 years.
May I give a prediction where you'll be next?
Okay, let's make a bet.
This is actually we have tarot now, and we're going to switch to esoteric.
No, I think you're going to do the same that the CFO in Dodo did. You invested in a startup, and then you'll get frustrated because they're not doing.
Actually, one of the startups they said exactly look, because you invested in 5 years, you're going to be our CMO because you'll know how we screwed up, and you will just There is a risk on that, I know, and we will see. Actually, in 5 years, let's meet each other and see where we are.
On that note, thank you so much. This was more than amazing. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Blanca. Thank you, Zoya. Cheers. Cheers, guys. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions. Thank you.